The southern trees bear a strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the root. Black bodies swinging, the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. Pastoral scene of the gallant South, the bulging eyes and the twisted mouth, scent of magnolia, sweet and fresh, the sudden smell, burning flesh. Here is a fruit for the crows to pluck, the rain to gather, the wind to suck, sun to rot, tree to dry. Here is a strange and bitter cry.
That was Pamela Means. Thank you, Pamela. Tonight's program, this afternoon's program, the Abel Meeropol Social Justice Writing Award is brought to you by Straw Dog Writers Guild. Straw Dog is a local community literary arts nonprofit. We offer free and low-cost programs to nurture and network writers around our area, writers at all stages of development. This award is funded by royalties from Strange Fruit and by grants from the Mass Cultural Council and the Northampton Arts Council. We are grateful for their support. Thank you also to the Straw Dog Writers Guild committee that planned this event, and to all of our volunteers, and to our co-sponsors listed on the back of your program. Thank you so much to the staff at Gateway City Arts, this glorious venue, who worked with us so generously putting the program together. And wait till you taste the food they have for afterwards. A particular heartfelt thanks to the Straw Dog Administrative Director, Laura Stone, whose work was critical to making today happen. Thank you. Strange Fruit was written by Abel Meeropol. And that was how Billie Holiday first performed it in 1939, simply and powerfully. That song, initially banned from the radio, continues to resonate, to inspire us not to accept injustice, to fight against it every way we can, including with our words, our stories and songs, our plays, our poems. My name is Ellen Meeropol, and Abel was my father-in-law. Who was Abel Meeropol, and how did a Jewish school teacher from the Bronx come to write this song? To tell you a bit of that story, please welcome Abel's younger son, Robby Meeropol.
Well, first, thank you, Straw Dog, for holding this program, and to Gateway City Arts, and also for all of you for turning out on what turned out to be a pretty nice day. Abel Meeropol was born in the Bronx in 1903. He was the son of Jewish immigrants who just before his birth fled the anti-Semitic pogroms of what is now Western Ukraine. He told me that as a child, he loved animals and abhorred violence. He had a dog named Sporty. He used the dog and his wits to avoid fights. He'd tell the other kid that he'd fight, but first would have to take his dog home. Then he'd leave and never return. Abel attended DeWitt Clinton High School. He wrote for its newspaper, its literary magazine, and even wrote the school anthem. He continued writing at New York City College, becoming the editor-in-chief of its literary magazine. He completed a master's degree in English literature at Harvard in 1926, but had insufficient funds to enter its PhD program. Abel came from a left-wing, labor-oriented family. In the late 1920s, he worked as the artistic director at Midvale, a communist-run adult summer resort. There he met Ann Schaefer, who he married in 1929. Both became teachers. Abel taught English at DeWitt Clinton, and he continued to write, while Ann also acted and sang. DeWitt Clinton had many remarkable students. Abel remembered one student who he described as bug-eyed and undersized, whose writing particularly impressed him. He recalled in the 1970s how impressed he was with 14-year-old James Baldwin's description of houses in his neighborhood with their winter coats of white. Abel continued to write poems. In the 1930s, he saw a gruesome photograph of the lynching of Thomas Shipp and Abram Smith in Indiana. He expressed his revulsion with a new poem, Bitter Fruit, which first appeared in the Teachers Union publication, The New York Teacher, in early 1937. Abel changed the title to Strange Fruit and set the poem to music in November 1938. Ann Meeropol sang and played it on her nylon string guitar at Teachers Union events at the end of that year and in early 1939. Later that year, Abel played it for Billie Holiday at Cafe Society in New York City's Greenwich Village, where she was performing. Cafe Society was the only integrated nightclub in New York City. Dubbed the right place for the wrong people, it spoofed the airs of the rich and famous. Billie agreed to perform the song as her last number of the evening. All service was stopped while she sang, so there would be silence. Then, when she finished, the stage lights were extinguished for dramatic effect. It is reported that the audience was so stunned at the end of her first performance that no one made a sound. Then one person started clapping, and that became a sustained ovation. The song caused a sensation. Strange Fruit was the composition my father was most proud of, but one he never lived with easily. Within a year of Billie's first performance, Abel was called before New York State's Rap Coup d'Air Commission, a legislative commission attempting to root out communist teachers, and asked if the Communist Party commissioned him to write the song. In the Great Red Scare of the 1950s, Strange Fruit almost disappeared from the public arena. But the Strange Fruit image, lynched bodies hanging from trees, was one of genius. It had gotten under our culture's skin, and as time passed, it seeped out of its pores. The song's rebirth was slow at first, recorded out of the country. Sting performed it on an album celebrating Amnesty International's 25th anniversary in 1986. And the punk group, Susie and the Banshees, followed suit the next year. Cassandra Wilson introduced Strange Fruit to a new generation in her widely acclaimed debut album in 1995. In 2000, Time magazine named it the Song of the Century, and David Margolick's book, Strange Fruit, Billie Holiday, Cafe Society, and An Early Cry for Civil Rights sold well. That was followed by Joel Katz's film documentary about the song in 2002. Interest in Strange Fruit has exploded in the last 5 years. It has been covered by dozens of artists from Andra Day to Pamela Means, who sang it for us earlier. In the audience this afternoon also is David Newstead, who is currently writing the first biography of Abel Meeropol. Abel died in 1986, but today Strange Fruit is everywhere. Over 80 years after Abel wrote those 97 potent words. That's right, the entire song contains less than 100 words. The pot is in full boil. Strange Fruit's growing power gives me hope. The pen just could be mightier than the sword after all. Abel left teaching to avoid being fired for his politics and went to Hollywood to write full-time. In 1944, he wrote his other famous song, The House I Live In. Abel wrote the lyrics, and his friend Earl Robinson wrote the music. In 1945, Frank Sinatra performed it in a short film, and in 1946, the film won an Academy Award. Anne and Abel attended a screening of the film at a local theater. When Abel realized that his anti-segregation verse had been cut from the film, he was furious. He started yelling in the theater, "Shit, shit, they ruined my song." He had to be physically ejected. Abel came back to New York City one step ahead of the Hollywood blacklist to write for television. In 1953, after the execution of my birth parents, Ethel and Julius Rosenberg, Abel and Anne adopted my brother and me. This act showed that the man who wrote Strange Fruit not only fought lynching with words, but also fought against it with his heart by adopting the sons of a couple he believed had been lynched by our government. My brother and I had been traumatized by the arrest, trial, and execution of our parents. We'd been shunned by relatives, placed in a shelter, shuffled around among friends, and even thrown out of the New Jersey public school system. But we thrived under Abel and Anne's shelter, stability, and love. Abel was not only a writer. He was a talented cartoonist, storyteller, and sound effects man. He created a series of characters for us who engaged in outrageously silly adventures whose sound effects drove my brother and me to hysterical laughter. When I was at summer camp, he sent me postcards with drawings of his characters, including Hungry Soup Bone, a hound who would howl every time food was mentioned. A miner would say, "I'm going to stake my claim," Hungry Soup Bone would howl. In 1969, Abel and Anne collected some of Abel's poetry and self-published a chapbook written under his pen name Lewis Allen. Entitled The Eye of the Storm, it is the only collection of his work in existence. There are only a couple of hundred copies of this original edition left. It shows both sides of Abel, the serious and the absurdly funny, and his brilliance at combining the two. Here's a favorite of Ellie's, entitled Preference. Some would like bombs to go hippity-hoppity, pulverize people, and spare private property. Abel was both one of the funniest and angriest people I've known. He once said, "I wrote Strange Fruit because I hate lynching, and I hate injustice, and I hate the people who perpetrate it." And yet what he enjoyed most was making people laugh. This is Abel Meeropol, the younger, our 5-year-old grandson, Abel's great-grandson and namesake. My father would have loved to make Abel Meeropol, the younger, laugh as well. My father would also have loved the work of Patricia Smith, who has been selected to receive the first Abel Meeropol Social Justice Writing Award.
Abel's world was one of racial violence and hatred, of targeting dissenters, of xenophobia and fear of immigrants. Sound familiar? Abel was a poet for his day. The recipient of the Abel Meeropol Social Justice Writing Award is a poet for our time. I believe that Abel would have deeply admired the work of the first recipient of this award in his name. Patricia Smith is the author of 8 books of poetry, including Incendiary Art, Should Have Been Jimmy Savannah, winner of the Lenore Marshall Prize from the Academy of American Poets, but Blood Dazzler, a National Book Award finalist, and Gotta Go, Gotta Flow, a collaboration with award-winning Chicago photographer Michael Abramson. Her talents are many and varied. She wrote the children's book, Jana and the Kings, and the history, Africans in America, a companion book to the award-winning PBS series. She edited the crime fiction anthology, Staten Island Noir. Her contribution to that anthology won the Robert L. Fish Award from the Mystery Writers of America for the best debut story of the year. Patricia is a Guggenheim Fellow, a National Endowment for the Arts grant recipient, 2-time winner of the Pushcart Prize, and a 4-time individual champion of the National Poetry Slam, the most successful poet in the competition's history. She's a professor at the College of Staten Island and in the MFA program at Sierra Nevada College. People say some amazing things about this woman. She's been called, quote, a testament to the power of words to change lives, and, quote, a clarion poet, uniting with passion and finesse, the personal and the political. But my favorite quote is the offhand comment made to me in Northampton last month when I mentioned to a young woman I had just met that Patricia was coming to read. I love her work, the woman said. What she does with a crowned sonnet in Should Have Been Jimmy Savannah will take your breath away. So hold on to your breath and please help us present the Abel Meeropol Social Justice Writing Award for 2017 to Patricia Smith.
Thank you all very much. Extremely honored to be here. Breath. Everybody take a breath. That felt good. It was when my mother found the pair of earrings I'd swiped from Woolworths. Those glittering hoops with a 2 for $1 price tag still attached. Those utterly irresistible earrings already greening in the pocket of my Wranglers, because if I ever wore them, everyone would know they were shoplifted. Nothing else about me had a shine like that. It was those times I inadvertently sassed an elder, forgetting to tack on a yes ma'am or yes sir, or letting my mouth run before my brain had a chance to stop it. Spurting out one of those grown folk words I picked up from the crew my mother liked to refer to as them badass friends of yours. It was that other day I spent the money that was supposed to pay for a field trip at school. Spent it on lemon heads and red hots and sugar daddies and licorice whips and a fat sour pickle and a peppermint stick. So on the way back home, I dropped dramatically into the dirt and wriggled around, pulled one pigtail out of its rubber band, punched a hole in my skirt with a pencil, and tried my damnedest to look like the victim of a robbery. Definitely not knowing that my mother was calmly, Okay, not so calmly, witnessing my miraculous transformation from our tenement window. I accepted a ride home from someone I did not know, a man who said he went to the same church as my mother, and even though he did, I was all the way in the wrong. I snuck off to Riverview, the amusement park, with another family. I shoveled the creamed corn into the trash when no one was looking, forgetting that creamed corn most definitely has a smell. Like every kid ever born anywhere at any time, I was convinced that everyone and everything was stupider than I was, that my shrewd mojo and superior intellect would grease a path through my days. Like today's Republican Party, I learned nothing at all from the string of disasters and guilty verdicts in my wake. Every time I dipped a toe into sin's cool river, a piranha snipped it off. But my limp was world class. An only child, first generation up north, born to parents who had migrated from Alabama and Arkansas, where children knew their place. I must have seemed to my mother and father not so much curious and adventurous, but much more like a one-woman crime spree, piling on city ways faster than they could whoop them out of me. Yes, I was whooped. With a belt, with a cord, with clothesline, with the tube from a douchebag. That sounds funny. Douche/bag. Okay. Only one person knows what I'm talking about. With my mother's open hand, with magazines and church brochures. That's just how it was. Time out, which amounted to white folks merely giving their wicked kids a breather, had not been invented and would never be invented as far as black folks were concerned. I could just imagine my mother. Calm down. Girl, you're going to calm down under this belt. Throughout all these various punishments, I promised not to do whatever I had done again. I flailed and wailed with Academy Award fervor. I called on a Lord who snickered because he had better things to do than come again and again to the aid of a wayward child. I know now that my confounded mother was terrified that I would not be tamed or controlled. All she knew is that she had to find a way to squelch my dangerous courage, to teach me my place, to introduce me to my tenuous root in a white world before that world took note and destroyed me. If I didn't listen to my mother's rules, her insistence on becoming smaller, quieter, less boisterous, less of myself, I could end up broken in both spirit and body. I could end up dead. I didn't know much about the steamy, problematic down south my parents had come from. I knew the South was steamy because they never stopped complaining about Chicago's cold teeth. I knew it was problematic because Walter Cronkite told me so. On our flickering floor model Philco, try that. People who looked like me were blasted against brick buildings by water cannons. People who looked like me were cornered by snarling police dogs or doused with sugar and ketchup while they sat silently at lunch counters. I heard about people who looked like me gone missing, swaying from poplars, swirling in rivers. I heard other names for people like me, names with ugly bladed edges, names to make us smaller, quieter, less boisterous, less of ourselves. Thank God, I thought, that my parents had escaped that place, that everything was new, that in the North I could pull whole words from my throat. The line between North and South was the line between how it used to be and how it was. I haven't said much about my father. To coddle his baby girl, my father shined a brash golden light on everything. He told me Arkansas tales and probably comic stories peppered with twangy homespun dialogue and colorful characters. He never spoke of a life that was less than the life he had. My mother didn't speak of the South at all. As far as she was concerned, her life began when she stepped off that rumbling Greyhound from Alabama. Down south was the dirt she brushed off her new city clothes. My mother is learning English. pulling rubbery cinnamon-tinged toes to a roll beneath her knees, sporting one swirling Baptist ski slope of a hat, she rides the rattling elevator to a windy city spire and pulls back her gulp as the elevator hurtles to heaven. Then she's stiffly seated at a scarred oak table across from a white government-sanctioned savior who has dedicated 8 hours a week to straightening afflicted black tongues. She guides my mother patiently through lazy ings and ers, slowly scraping her throat clean of the moist and raging infection of Aliceville, Alabama. There are barely muttered apologies for colored sounds. There is much beginning again. I want to talk right before I die. Want to stop saying ain't and I done been like I ain't got no sense. I'm a grown woman. I done lived too long to be so stupid, acting like I just got off the boat. My mother has never been on a boat. But 50 years ago, merely 1 million of her, clutching strapped cases, Jet's Emmett Till issue, and thick paper chicken wings in waxed bags, stepped off hot rumbling buses at northern stations in Detroit, in Philly, in the bricked cornfield of Chicago. Brushing stubborn scarlet dust from their shoes, they said, "We're north now," slinging it in backdoor syllable as if those words were vessels big enough to hold country folks' overwrought ideas of light. Back then, my mother thought it a modern miracle, this new living in a box stacked upon other boxes, where every flat surface reeked of Lysol and effort, and chubby roaches, cross-eyed with rage, dragged themselves across freshly washed dishes and dropped dizzy from the ceiling into our Murphy beds, our wash tubs, our open steaming pot of collards. Of course, there was a factory just 2 bus rides close, a job that didn't involve white babies or blue laundry, where she worked in tense line with other dreamers, repeatedly, all those oily, hot-combed heads drooping, no talking as scarred brown hands romanced machines, just the sound of doing it right and juicy fruit cracking. A mere mindset away, there had to be a corner tavern where dead bluesmen begged second chances from the juke, and where my mama, perched man-weary on a comfortable stool by the door, could look like a Christian who was just leaving. And on Sunday, at Pilgrim Rest Missionary Baptist Church, she would pull on the pure white gloves of service and wail to the rafters when the Holy Ghost hot hand grew itchy and insistent at the small of her back. She was his child, finally loosed of that damnable delta, building herself anew in this land of sidewalks, blue jukes, and sizzling fried perch in virgin white boxes. See her, all nap burned from her crown, one gold tooth winking, soft hair riding her lip, blouses starched hard, Orlon sweaters with smattering of stitched roses, A-line skirts the color of unleashed winter. My mother's voice is like homemade cornbread slathered with butter, full of places for heat to hide. When she is pissed, it punches straight out and clears the room. When she is scared, it turns practical, matter of fact, like when she called to say, "They found your daddy this morning. Somebody shot him. He dead. He ain't come to work this morning. I know something was wrong." When Mama talks, the southern swing of it is wild with unexpected blooms, like the fields she never told me about in Alabama. Her rap is peppered with ain't gots and I done bins and he bees, just like mine is when I'm color among color. During worship, when talk becomes song, her voice collapses and loses all acquaintance with key, so of course it's my mother's fractured alto wailing above everyone, uncaged, unapologetic, and creaking toward heaven. Now she wants to sound proper when she gets there. A woman got some sense in future need to upright herself, talk English instead of talking wrong. It's strange to hear the precise rote of Annie Pearl's new mouth. She slips sometimes, but but is proud when she remembers to bite down on dirt-crafted contractions and double negatives. Sometimes I wonder whatever happened to the warm expanse of the red dust woman who arrived with a little sin in all the good wrong words. I dream her breathless, maybe leaning forward a little in her seat on the Greyhound. I ain't never seen, she begins, grinning through the grime at Chicago, city of huge shoulders, thief of tongues. Thank you very much. But sometimes a place can take aim and burrow itself into your head and refuse to leave. I don't think my mother expected to birth a child who insisted on being herself. So whenever I was louder than a colored girl should be, whenever I skipped across boundaries, spoke my own words, forgot who and where I was, dreamed bigger than I should dream, she would pull out the picture of the boy. That child Emmett in that casket. Sometimes the page was tapped, flush against plaster with a pearled hat pin, or jammed into a dime store frame with a glowing Jesus. In some kingly front rooms, its place was in the shadow box, propped on one ripped edge, or laid curly-cornered on the coffee table, smudged and eaten sheer with the pass-around. In the kitchen, it was blurred by stew smoke or pot liquor blotched until somebody got smart enough to scotch tape it to the door of the humming fridge, and the boy without eyes kept staring. Mamas did the slow fold before wedging it into their flowered plastic coin purses. Daddies found a sacred place in pleather wallets right next to the thought of cash. And at least once every week, usually on Sunday after church, or when you dared think you didn't have to speak proper to that old white lady who answered the phone at your daddy's job, or when, as Mama said, you showed your ass by sassing or back-talking, the page would be pulled down, pulled out, unfolded, smoothed flat, and you had to look. Look! And they made sure you kept looking, while your daddy shook his head, mumbling, "This is why you got to act right around white folks," then dropped his smoke-threaded gaze to whisper, "Lord, they killed that child more than one time." Mama held on to your eyes. You see what can happen if you don't be careful. She meant white men could turn you into a stupid reason for a suit, that your last face would be silt, stunned in its skid and worshipped, your right eye reborn in the cave of your mouth. "Look!" she screeched. You did, but then you remembered there weren't any pictures of you in the house, pinned high on the wall, folded up tight against the Lord, toted like talisman in wallet or purse. You'd searched, woe climbing like river in your chest, but there were no pictures of you anywhere. You sparked no moral. You were alive. The boy. The boy, Emmett Till, died the year I was born. My mother made sure my eyes stayed open when she showed me the picture of the boy. There was silence while I stared and stared. Did you know that if you cross your eyes, everything blurs? I tried to blur the boy. I would cross my eyes and pretend to still be looking at the boy. It hurts to have your eyes crossed for too long. When my eyes uncrossed because they were so tired of being crossed, I did not see a boy's face. And suddenly, I did not understand water. How had water worked like knives on the boy? Where were his eyes? Where were his nose and ears? Where was his nappy hair? What did his body look like under the suit? Why put him in a suit? One of the points of his collar was turned up. I remember that one of the points of his collar was turned up, His monstrous mouth was turned down at the corners as if he was sad. But I just missed the last bus sad, not I've been rotting in a river sad. What kind of life are we living when your boundaries for that life are drawn by a dead black boy? I want you to understand this. A whole generation of children was raised on that picture. We were told, live your life so that this does not happen to you. Fear the moment just before this one. Fear the moment. Fear what comes after. No matter which way you walk, feel this fear in your path. Fear men who have not yet crossed your path, men who do not yet know your name, men who have not yet been born. Fear white men who stalk in the moonwash. Fear white women behind screen doors. Fear candy. Fear places you have never been. Fear voices you have never heard. Fear being renamed. Fear what your body says to those who do not know your body. Fear the misunderstandings in your skin. When you lie down at night, dream this fear. Wake up to this fear. Be ruled by this fear. Go to church and sing to this fear. This fear is your other God. I want you to understand this. A whole generation of children were told, hey, welcome to the world. Here is what can happen to you. Here is what you are frightened of. Every maybe, every could have, every perhaps, everything, everyone. I want you to understand this. It was years before I learned that everything Emmett Till's no mouth said was true. That I was as feisty and as Negro and as doomed as he had been. But my mama was steadfast in her determination to steer me away from his fate. Don't look white people in the eye when they talk to you. Be home before the street lights come on. They don't like it when colored folks go downtown to buy stuff. Don't tell nobody you live on the west side. That's where the dumb colored folks live. Stop being so bold, so full of yourself, acting like white folks. Wait, act like white folks. Speak right English. If you think you're gonna sound stupid, don't say nothing. Come to think of it, just don't say nothing. Don't say nothing unless they talk to you first. I listened, but I didn't want to listen. I still felt there was some life beyond the bowed head, the whispered voice, the staunch obedience, the damn supplication all the damn time, no questions asked. There had to be a Patricia Ann somewhere, a person with a real name, a someone who could say what the drowned boy couldn't say anymore out of his mistake of a mouth. It was the gradual discovery of what words could do. There were ways for language to reach places I had never heard about in school. When my father told me his down south stories, he introduced the notion of life as a flawed, glorious, and unending narrative, one that was designed to be lived in instead of outside of. Soon his stories moved from where he had been to where he was. I heard the serial adventures of folks at the candy factory where he and my mother worked. You guys know malted milk balls? Yeah, she says, yeah. My mother and father both worked at the Leaf Candy Factory all their working lives, so much so that 3 years after my mother retired, if you walked in a room where she was, you could smell sugar because it was in her skin. That was just a little aside. The people who worked there all wore sugar-dusted hats. They told jokes, lost money playing dice, lied to their wives and husbands, fell and broke bones on the job, went to church on Sundays after wild Saturday nights. But, as my father told it, they also got too sick to work. They got shot at. Sometimes they died. We had no choice. The stories went everywhere, and if we were to truly live, we had to follow them. And then, when I was 13, this happened. Miss Stein scribbled a word on the blackboard and said, "Who can pronounce this?" And the word was anemone. And from that moment you first felt the clutter of possible in your mouth, from the time you stumbled through the rhythm and she slow smiled, you suddenly knew you had the right to be explosive, to sling syllables through back doors, to make up your own damn words if you needed them. All that day, sweet anemone tangled in your teeth, spurted sugar tongue, led you to the dictionary where you were assured that it still existed, to the cave of the bathroom where you warbled it in bounce echo, and finally, convinced you own that teeny gospel, you wrote it again and again and again, and if one word could feel that glorious on the tongue, could heft that much muscle, I knew I had access to a power, one word after the other, after another, that could change the look of days, rattle perspective, speak a startling truth out loud. I realized that what my father was trying to tell me, with his stories starring people from his past, if you can build a history, you can build a future. And the owner of every single word you write is you. If someone, anyone, strikes you down, what you have written will breathe beyond you. It will scream if you need it to scream. You can speak your mind, and you can change minds. But I didn't absorb all my father's lessons right away. Instead, I began to believe that my words had value, that they were most effective as entertainment. I learned to line them up like music, and people applauded. For years in the poetry slam, I played a game for points. Your trauma, my trauma. Whose trauma wins? Who wows the crowd tonight? Then, as I was thinking that slamming was the same as rebellion, that I was really, really resisting, that the burgeoning audiences meant I discovered the most effective way to heft my fist, I heard a woman named Lisa Buscani. Lisa Buscani got up on stage and she did a poem. It was about the man who cut the hair of the people who were about to go into the gas chamber. She did it in his voice, and at the end of the poem, there wasn't any applauding. There weren't any scores hefted. No one knew how to move from that moment into the next moment. And I thought to myself, that's what the words are supposed to do. I could move outside of my given body to find answers, to realize where I was rooted. I didn't have to spend my days fearing what I did not understand. Instead, I needed to find ways to move closer to it. I often tell my students to try on all the shoes in a story, and when those shoes become uncomfortable, start writing. Make the words come hard. Give yourself nightmares. Stand up to those voices that are urging you to get smaller. Years ago, I had a conversation with an undertaker who told me he was very, very tired of his job suddenly. When I asked him why, he said, I'm tired of burying young people. Every time his phone would ring, it would be a mother on the other end asking him to bury her son. And it used to be the phone would ring and there would be some older established family, and a member of that family had gotten old and had died, most times of natural causes, and he'd work with the family to plan the funeral. He says, but now I don't like to answer the phone. When a bullet enters the brain, the head explodes. I can think of no softer warning for the mothers who sit double before my desk, nodding their smooth brown hands and begging, fix my boy, fix my boy. Here's his high school picture. And the mildly mustachioed player in the crinkled snapshot looks nothing like the plastic bag of boy stored and dated in the cold room downstairs. In the picture, he is cocky and chiseled, clutching the world by the balls. I know the look. Now he is slivers of cheek, bits of jawbone, assorted teeth, a surprised eye, bloody tufts of napped hair, the building blocks of my business. So I turn the photo face down and talk numbers instead. The high price of miracles startles the young mother, but she is prepared. I know that she has sold everything she owns, that cousins and uncles have emptied their empty bank accounts, that she dreams of her baby in tuxedo satin, flawless in an open casket, a cross or blood-red rose tacked to his fingers, his halo set at a cocky angle. So I write a figure on a piece of paper and push it across to her. She stares at the number. Jesus. But Jesus isn't on my payroll. I work alone until the dim insistence of mourning, gluing, stitching, creating a chin with a brushstroke. I plump shattered skulls, then paint the skin to suggest warmth and impending breath. I plop glass eyes into rigid sockets, then carve eyelids from forearm and inner thigh. I reach into collapsed cavities to rescue a tongue, an ear. Lips are never easy to recreate. And I try not to remember the stories, the tales the mothers must tell me to ease their own hearts. Oh, they cry. My Ronnie, my Michael, my David, my Chico. He was on his way home. A dark car slowed down. They must have thought he was someone else. He stepped between two gang members. I mean, really, he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Fix my boy. He was a good boy. Make him the way he was. But I have explored the jagged gaps in the boy's body, and I have soothed the angry edges of bullet holes. I have touched him in places no mother knows, and I have birthed his new face. I know he believed himself invincible, that he most likely hissed before the bullets lifted him off his feet. I try not to imagine his swagger, his lizard-lidded gaze, his young mother screaming into the phone. She says that she will find the money to bury him. And I know that is the truth that fuels her, forcing her to place one foot in front of the other. Suddenly, I'm going to take her down to the chilly room, open the bag, and shake its terrible bounty onto the gleaming steel table. I want her to see him, to touch him, to press her lips to the flap of cheek, because the woman needs to wither, finally, and move on. We both jump as the phone rattles in its hook. I pray it's my wife, a bill collector, a wrong number. But the wide, questioning silence on the other end is too familiar. It's another mother needing a miracle. It's another homeboy coming home. In 1991, someone painted a swastika on Plymouth Rock. We are in New England. I'll just let that set in. Someone painted a swastika on Plymouth Rock. They couldn't figure out who did it, but they traced it to a group. And the group was called the White Youth League. It was one of these Aryan groups. And they interviewed a representative from that group. And he was spewing all this hatred. I hate blacks, I hate Jews, I hate gays. And, you read an interview like that and you either say, what an idiot, and you keep going on with your day, or you might agree with them, but you move on. As a writer, as a thinking person, you could think, he started here, I started here, and for some reason he went that way, I went this way. And I wanted to try and write a poem that would bring us back to center. They call me skinhead, and I got my own beauty. It is knife scrawled across my back in sore, jagged letters. It is in the way my eyes snap away from the obvious. I sit in my dim matchbox, on the edge of a bed, tousled with my ragged smell, slide razors across my hair, count how many ways I can bring blood closest to the surface of my skin. These are the duties of the righteous, the ways of the anointed. The face that moves in my mirror is huge and pockmarked, apple-cheeked, scraped pink and brilliant. I am filled with my own spit. 2 years ago, a machine that slices leather sucked in my hand and held it, whacking off 3 fingers at the root. I didn't feel nothing until I looked down and saw them on the floor next to my boot heel, and I ain't worked since then. I sit here and watch niggers take over my TV set, walking like kings up and down the sidewalks in my head, walking like their fat black mamas named them freedom, while my shoulders tell me that ain't right. So I move out into the sun, where my beauty makes them lower their heads, or into the night with a lead pipe up my sleeve, a razor in my boot. I was born to make things right. It's easy now to bend my big body into shadows, to move from a place where there was nothing into the stark circle of a street light, the pipe raised up high over my head. It's a kick to watch their eyes get big, round and gleaming like cartoon jungle boys, just in that second before they know the pipe's gonna come down. And I got this thing I like to say. Hey, listen to this. I like to say, hey, nigger, Abe Lincoln's been dead a long time. I get hard listening to their skin burst. I was born to make things right. Then this reporter comes around. Seems I was a little sloppy kicking some fag's ass, and he opens up and screams about it. So this reporter finds me at home in bed, the TV flashes licking my face clean. Same old shit. I ain't got no job. The colors and spics got them. Why ain't I working? Look at my hand, asshole. No, I'm not part of no organized group. I'm just a white boy who loves his race, fighting for a pure country. Sometimes it's just me. Sometimes 3. Sometimes 30. AIDS will take care of the faggots. Then it's gonna be white on black in the streets. Then there'll be 3 million. I tell him that. So he writes it up, and I come off looking like I'm some kind of goddamn freak, like I'm Hitler himself. I ain't that lucky, but I got my own beauty. It's in my steel-toed boots, in the hard corners of my shaved head. I look in the mirror and I hold up my mangled hand, only the baby finger left. I know it's the wrong finger, but fuck you all anyway. I am riding the top rung of the perfect race, my face scraped pink and brilliant. I'm your baby, America. Your boy. Drunk on my own spit, I am goddamn fucking beautiful. And I was born and raised. Right here. I had taken on my terror. He was the modern version of the down south demon who followed my parents to Chicago. I had tried to enter the body of the person who despised me, who would break me, who would gladly gouge out my eyes and weigh my drowning body down with a cotton gin fan. It was exhilarating to inhabit him, to own his life for 3-4 minutes. There was no way he could keep me out. I felt eminently powerful, vengeful, and yet somehow empathetic. I probed his hatred, but I also tried to touch something human in him. And in routing out that humanity, I came closest to breaking the hold he had over me. And that's how I learned that resistance is not hatred. Remembering that we are human among human is what fuels me. From the days when my mother forced me to stare at one of my possible futures, a future I decided not to accept, I come to this. I know now that my reason in life is to address life's lack of reason, and to be relentless in doing so. So I thank you for this. Often it feels like I'm writing in a vacuum, that the war is a solitary war and that no one really hears. Thank you for reminding me that someone is always listening. And I wanted to end with this. To the 6th grade class, Lily C. Evans Elementary School, Dade County, Miami. I am astonished at their mouthful names. Lacanicia, Chevalane, DeLeo, Fumaleo. Their ragged rebellions and lip gloss pouts and all those pants drooped as drapery. I rejoice when they kiss my face, whisper wet and urgent in my ear, make me their obsession because I have brought them poetry. They shout me raw, bruise my wrist with their pulling, and brashly claim me as mama as they cradle my head in their little laps, waiting for new words to grow in my mouth. You. Angry, jubilant, weeping poets, we are all saviors, reluctant hosannas in the limelight, but you knew that, didn't you? So let us bless this 6th grade class. 40 cracking voices, 40 nappy heads, and all of them raise their hands when I ask. They have all seen the Reaper, grim in his heavy robe, pushing the button for the Dead Project elevator, begging for a break at the corner pawn shop, cackling wildly in the back pew of the Baptist church. I ask the death question, and 40 fist punch the air. Me! And O'Neill, matchstick crackchild, watched his mother's body become a claw. And 9-year-old Tico Jefferson, barely big enough to lift the gun, fired a bullet into his throat when Mama bended his back with a lead pipe. Tamika cried into a sofa pillow when Daddy blasted Mama into the north wall of their cluttered one-room apartment. Danya's cousin, gone in a drive-by. Dark window, click, 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 gone, says Danya, her tiny finger a barrel, the thumb a hammer. I am astonished at their losses. And yet when I read a poem about my own hard-eyed teenager, Jeffrey asks, is he dead yet? Cannot be comprehended. My 18-year-old still pushing and pulling his own breath. And 40 faces pity me, knowing that I will soon be as they are, numb to our bloodied histories, favoring the Reaper with a thumbs up and a wink, hearing the question and shouting, Me, Miss Smith, I know somebody dead. Can poetry hurt us, they ask me, before crawling into my words to sleep? I love you, Nicole says. Nicole wearing my face, pimples peppering her nose, and she is as black as angels are. Nicole's braids kissed with match flame to seal them. And can you teach me to write a poem about my mama, Miss Smith? I mean, you write about your daddy, and he's dead. Can you teach me to remember my mama? A teacher tells me this is the first time Nicole has admitted that her mother is gone. Murdered by slim silver needles and a stranger rifling through her blood, the virus pushing her skeleton through for Nicole to see. And now this child with rusty knees and mismatched shoes sees poetry as her scream and asks me for the words to build her mother again, replacing the voice, stitching on the lost flesh. So poets, as we take the stage, as we flirt and sin and rejoice behind microphones, remember Nicole. She knows that we are here now, and she is an empty vessel waiting to be filled. And she is waiting. And she is waiting. And she waits. Thank you. Thank you so much.
southern trees bear a strange fruit, blood on